If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Downfall Network for more cool content.
What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin Jon.
And I am Shedlord von Riffenberger.
Full name again. And we are back with a discography ranking. Now, we did a little poll here not too long ago. We each had 3 bands we threw in there, and
the fans have spoken.
The fans definitely spoke, and we took the top 3 voted on, which was cool because each one of us had picked a different one, and then you got each one of us, which is cool. And the first one, which took off quick as hell, was Bolt Thrower. And that was my pick, and I was super excited because I love this band. They are, I think, one of the most influential death metal bands. They were part of the grindcore pack, and man, they just had this cool theme that went throughout all their music, just war, and it was very empowering. And I was looking forward to going through all these albums, so we're going to do that right now. Now, these guys formed in Coventry, England in 1986, and they were originally part of the grindcore pack with Carcass, Napalm Death, and Extreme Noise Terror, and honestly, they kind of were a little bit different, and you kind of get that with their first album, In Battle There Is No Law. Now, it's important to note that their demo had a different lineup. Joe Bench and Carl Willits were not in the band at that point, but they joined for the full-length release when they recorded it, and they were pretty much rounded out with Gavin Ward on guitars, Barry Thompson also on guitars, and Andrew Whale on drums. Now, this is a very different release in terms of the whole history of this band because it is grindcore, but it's also very riffy grindcore. And I absolutely love the intro track. That whole intro is just get ready for a fight. I have this at number 5. I love this album. There are albums I definitely love more. I like the fact that out of the grindcore pack here, they definitely crafted something a bit different. This wasn't like Carcass's Reek of Putrefaction or Napalm Death Scum. This had big, chuggy riffs, but at the same time, you got all those punk aspects to it. And overall, I dig this album.
I had it at number 6. I actually really like this record quite a bit. I wish it had a better mix because it is really riffy. In fact, it's more riffy than some of the stuff later on in the game. You can definitely see where they were trying to go even in the beginning. It had a Napalm Death feel. It had like an early Slayer feel at times. An early Death feel to it.
It was on Malicious Vinyl Records. Is the only one they ever put out on that label, and honestly, they didn't promote them very well. They didn't have the access to the best equipment, studio time, so it was kind of a rush job, so understandably, it was really raw.
It falls to number 6 for me as well. Being a guitar player, the guitars were very mushy, and the moment that a blast beat came in, the guitars were damn near inaudible, and that was a little annoying to hear. However, I understand the strains of, just starting out and everything. When they riffed out, they fucking riffed out, and it was so cool. And when they played blast beats, I couldn't really hear what else was going on besides the drum due to production. But still, there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of good riffs on there. So I'll give it number 6 out of 8.
Yeah, I mean, this came out in '88. They were still really learning how to record a blast beat in the studio, because no one was really doing that at that point.
Exactly.
So they were definitely kind of pioneers in that spirit. But 1 year later, they signed with Earache Records and form a little bit of a bond with a very special tabletop game called Warhammer 40K and put out Realm of Chaos.
Where my nerds at? Warhammer!
This was an interesting kind of cross performance because you got, nerds and fucking metalheads, which honestly are the same people. I know them.
Right? I am them.
And they actually had songs that were actually themed to this album, Plague Bearer and World Eater specifically. Now this showed off a bit of a change in the style overall, way more of a death metal influence, still grindcore in some spots. The recording, though still rough, was a lot better, and I think it had one of the best guitar tones in terms of that early death metal sound.
Agreed.
But they still got buried during blast beats.
Yeah, and the bass was pretty much just kind of mud.
If they could record all this again in modern day standards, dude, these would all be fucking rippers.
Yeah, I mean, you can still do it with all the grit, too, and make it sound good. I have this number 2, though. This is a killer album. It's super influential. I love how just heavy it is. All That Remains is one of my favorite songs on here. I think it's just absolutely amazing. Through the Eyes of Terror, giant. Lost Souls Domain 2, I love that one. It has a particularly sludgy intro to it, and just everything about this album is just pure heaviness.
I gave this 5. Number 5.
Wow.
Still very raw. The guitars still get lost in the mix. But once again, my favorite tracks were All That Remains and Prophet of Hatred.
The opener riff on Prophet of Hatred is banging.
That song slays fucking balls. We start hearing, you know, of course they have like the... Kerry King invented a whole style of solos with basically it's just like, I'm just going to grab the tremolo bar and just like, look, I'm going down. Oh, look, I'm going up. Look, I'm going down.
Ooh, but, I touched the string.
But the chaotic vibe of the album, it does fit. And of course, the chaotic vibe of Slayer, you know, that does fit. And so I thought it was really cool to kind of hear that. The blast beat sections were, of course, back in full force, but it was a little bit better EQ'd this time, but the guitar still got lost in the shuffle a little bit. So you could tell things were evolving still, but I think I still like some of their more later albums more. But I enjoyed this one better than the first album, so it moved up one and made it
humble beginnings, but you can see the improvement.
This is number 2 for me. I like the real gritty recording. In fact, it sounds, in terms of modern metal now, they seem to be going back to this kind of tone. Now, admittedly, the guitars do get lost a little bit, which is unfortunate, but it's still 1989 at this point. Yeah. I mean,
and we're still learning. We're still learning how to record this stuff.
Right. I mean, but the album overall, I thought
there's some albums recorded in '88 and '89 that still had a lot better guitar production.
For sure, but I mean.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
The slim pickings back then, too.
You're right. You're right. Know? I'm just being a dick.
I know.
I'm being Dick Lord.
Realm of dicks.
But the overall sound, too, I liked it. It had kind of more of a death metal feel to it. Like an old school death metal feel. I got a lot of like very early Morbid Angel, early Napalm Death out of it, for sure. Which is, again, I mean, they were... in the running for
even
also a kick-ass band.
Sounds like All That Remains that borderline doomy at times.
Yep. Oh yeah.
There's even some doom moments.
And hands down, this is the best album cover they ever had. I love the album cover.
I really do too.
And we got their kick-ass logo. Finally, like, the old logo was cool, but that logo, well, it stood the test of time pretty much.
Lost Souls Domain, the blast on Drowned in Torment is good. And Realm of Chaos, the title track, is just this good little banger.
Yeah.
Bolt Thrower always does a really good job of making sure their title tracks kick ass.
Yeah.
You'll notice that throughout.
Yep.
The title tracks are always good.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's smart on their part, but like, it's just something I noticed. I was like, man, I like this one. I'm going to write it. Oh, it's the title track. Man, I really like this one. I'm going to write down. Oh, it's the title track. Man, I really like this one. And so on and so forth.
Yep.
I love this album. This is a hugely influential one, too. Like, if you talk to anyone about Bolt Thrower, this is one of the albums they bring up almost immediately, and I 100% see why. Move ahead 2 years, and we get to War Master. This is my number one
masterpiece.
It's my number one.
Pretty much
my number one as well.
Yeah, I pretty much knew it as soon as we started this. Like, this has been a favorite of mine for years. This is pretty much everything I love about Bolt Thrower, and pretty much every era wrapped up into one awesome album. You still have the blast beats, you still have the death metal influence, you still
all the good stuff that you enjoyed about the first album,
melody.
But the production finally caught up with the music, and it was just as good as the music. And it really stood out, man. I can finally hear the guitars. Hey!
It does sacrifice some of the grit though on the guitars.
It does.
Notice that
a little bit.
Yep.
What Dwells Within, quite possibly one of my favorite riffs in the entire Bolt Thrower back catalog.
Profane Creation has this Black Sabbath-y type riff that I really enjoy.
So does Shreds of Sanity. Yeah. It also has a real doomy Sabbath-y riff.
And Cenotaph, get used to that intro.
Because it's popping back up, brother.
It pops back up.
Ancestor, sorry.
But killer. And of course, the title track, because Bolt Thrower knows how to write title tracks. I love the overall style of this. Like, this was definitely 100% death metal. The grind elements were pretty much all but gone here. But the fact that the solos were definitely more melodic, you still had your squealy dive bombs, but you actually had a lot more melody, and there were legit just giant hooks.
I think there was a lot more variety in the songwriting and a little more creativity than previous two albums, and that took it a long way.
It was a good trend.
And there was a little bit of a change in Carl Willett's vocals. They were a little bit higher up this time. They weren't as super, super low. And I think that actually kind of added a little bit more like impact, because you could understand these cool war-themed lyrics that he was going through. I absolutely love this album. I mean, it's pretty much universal that we all love this album.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
But moving ahead 1 year to 1992, we get the IVth Crusade, and this actually represented a big change. Now, first off, this is a double meaning. Not only is this their fourth album, this is actually, a bit of it is about the IVth Crusade with Constantinople and the capturing of it. But this isn't a concept album because it isn't entirely about it. Now this was, again, a big change. No more blast beats, pretty much throughout the entire career.
They gone.
And this brought in some Doom influence. They were really big on Candlemass and Pentagram when they were recording this, and they really wanted to do something a lot different. Now, I have this one at number 6. It isn't as though I don't like it. It just fell by the wayside in terms of albums I liked more. But this was a really stark contrast to War Master. Like, it was still dynamic, but I don't know, like sometimes I think they labored the Doom side too much and you kind of missed the intensity, and the recording's kind of so-so on this one.
The production regressed from War Master, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a better mix. The guitars are better defined, but the drums are lost a little bit in the mix this time.
So is the bass.
So, I mean, yeah, and the bass too. So, I don't know. This is my number 4 for what I just said. A better mix, but still things were lost. Again, this seemed a little bit more straightforward on a death metal influence. An old school death metal influence.
There were some great songs in here.
Yep.
I think the intro track is really interesting. The fact that it's very slow. It's not this big, blast beat fest or even kind of thrashy or really up tempo. It actually kind of stays really doomy.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call this death doom. It's still very much like old school death metal.
Yeah.
Embers brings back the Cenotaph opening, which I thought was cool.
And the breakdown of Embers is tits.
We're Next to Conquer. As the World Burns, that's probably my favorite track on this album.
Ritual. I liked Ritual.
Yep, I did too.
The thing for me is I put this at 7, and I like that it had some doomier stuff, and once again, more like Necrotic, it just kind of pales in comparison to some of their other later releases. The one thing I like too is I felt like the solos this time fit the songs a little bit better.
Yeah.
They actually wrote the solos to what was going on in the background. It wasn't just like go down 3 whole steps, go up 3 whole steps, shake it violently, and easy bake oven. The thing that drove me nuts about this album is while it took it to Doomy Land, which I enjoy,
Doom's great.
they hung on certain riffs way too long. And
Agreed.
I know sometimes that's a thing with Doom, but this was even long for Doom. Like, they just kept harboring some of these same riffs over and over and over.
That appears again in later albums too.
True.
Unfortunately.
True.
I mean, they definitely rolled with that Doom influence, but it was missing some intensity on there. And like I said, you went from an absolute genre-defining album, I would say, like in terms of like 1991 and all its giant releases in death metal. This is different, but it's still good. It just kind of fell by the wayside just because I liked other albums more. Namely, when you get to 1994 with their album For Victory. This was the last album with Andrew Whale on drums, and Carl Willits even left temporarily after this one. But oh my god, in terms of their groovier era, this is the best thing they put out.
This is an epic fucking album.
Number 3 for me, I absolutely love it. Start to finish, this was an incredible listen. These songs are anthemic, and the fact that they stayed in that groovy pocket, it didn't dull down the intensity, it didn't sound repetitive because they would mix in a lot of really cool melodies, and there was just this epic but just aggressive quality.
And this is where I thought the mix sounded pretty even kiltered too. Like, it was a little thin and probably a little quiet, but it, like, all the instruments pretty much stood out on their own. This was my number 3 as well. Yeah, all the songs are killer. Remembrance, again, the title track. Lest
we forget.
Silent Demise, I thought, even had like a Crowbar or Sepultura feel to it.
There is a little bit of that sludginess.
I put this at number 2. I think this is an epic fucking album, from the very opening fucking guitar harmony riffs all the way to my favorite part of the whole album, which is the ending of Armageddon Bound. It's fucking amazing. From the solo to the end of Armageddon Bound is fucking perfect. Lest We Forget is a fucking jam.
Love that song.
I really liked that they would put riffs over the chugging guitar rhythms. That added a lot of dynamic and a lot of feel to them. The title track is a fucking ripper. Surprise, surprise.
Right?
And yeah, everything about this album I just dug the shit out of. So yeah, this is my number 2. I love this album.
The energy went up. Like from IVth Crusade, like it sounded like, all right, we're still not comfortable where we are with this new sound we're kind of adopting. This sounded like they were comfortable, they were confident, and just a whole album full of rippers. It's incredible, start to finish. Now, during this time that Carl Willits left, briefly, they had Martin Van Drunen from Asphyx and Pestilence fame, but he only stayed on for a little bit because he apparently had some issues with this hair falling out courtesy of a disease, which I guess he's fine now because he's got a giant full head of hair. But they took a 4-year break, and during this time they left Earache and signed with Metal Blade Records. They had some serious issues with royalties, I guess, with Earache, which I'm starting to hear a lot of bad stuff about Earache here lately.
I've been reading some stuff.
They even went as far as to tell people not to buy greatest hits or even the remasters that were coming out of their stuff. Like, they were pretty furious. Now, Carl Willits did come back. He just briefly rejoined the band to do the recording for their new album, Mercenary. Now, this is the only album to feature Alex Thomas. Briefly, Martin Kearns joined the band after Andrew Whale left, but then left before Mercenary was recorded and then rejoined later. This is my number 8. This is my least favorite one. Down to the mix and just the overall feel of the album, there is just a lack of intensity and enthusiasm, and it's just really watered down. Like, this is probably the most watered down Bolt Thrower has ever sounded, in my opinion.
I don't know, this is my number 7. It's not quite at the very bottom, but the mix is super thin.
It's guitars like paper are not thin. Prominent.
Yeah, and the drums, like the timekeepers of the drums get lost. So the ride cymbal and the hi-hat are non-existent. The songs are alright, but they're kind of meh. The only thing I thought that stood out to me was Powder Burns, because it sounded like early Helmet.
Like, Laid to Waste had almost kind of a new metal-y feel. But, I mean, overall, I thought some of the songs were too long for what they were going for, which is just kind of stripped down groove metal, I guess.
Yep.
And they just kind of plodded along and just, I don't know what happened there. It just lacked everything.
Chlorophyll, more like borophyll. Mercenary holding strong, dead last. This album lacked a lot of the passion and aggression that previous Bolt Thrower albums had. There's only a few spots in the album, like the track Zeroed I thought was cool. Return to Chaos had almost like a Jugulator, Demolition, Judas Priest kind of vibe to it. Other than that, nothing else really stood out to me about this other than like, man, I can't wait to get to the next Bolt Thrower album.
The late 90s were rough on metal bands. I mean, it really was. Like, the whole new metal thing was starting to take up full swing. Alternative radio didn't want to touch anything metal. So, I mean, it just, you know, there was really no incentive to write anything inspired, because I don't think they were inspired on this one. It just came out flat.
Right.
So moving on to 2001, Carl Willits, again, left the band, but they picked up Dave Ingram, formerly of Benediction, and Martin Kearns returned on drums. And they recorded Honor, Valour, Pride, which was a bit better than Mercenary. At least it had the energy again. It was kind of close to what they were doing on For Victory. Just not quite there. Like, I like Dave Ingram's vocal performance on here, but I think there's just more energy behind Carl Willits. He just kind of, when he barks out those anthemic verses, there's just more punch to it. This has a lot of good songs on it. I like Inside the Wire and K-Machine specifically.
K-Machine is a fucking jam fest.
But it gets really formulaic really quick. There are spots in them that sound really uninspired. So this one fell to 7. I don't dislike this one as much as I disliked Mercenary, apparently, but it's still just not quite there.
I had this at number 8, and it's not that I dislike any of these albums. I actually became a really big Bolt Thrower fan in listening to this discography. But I thought the songs kind of just lacked imagination, especially since they were longer songs.
Yeah.
And remember how we were speaking earlier about a hook that hangs on forever, or a riff that hangs on forever? The longer songs they used to fill was 75% of one riff. It just kept repeating and repeating, and it never progressed out of there. The song Valour was cool, but honestly, I thought it kind of sounded a little bit like 6 Feet Under.
Yeah.
Just a less melodic 6 Feet Under. I hate to make that comparison, but it was just kind of meat and potatoes.
Ingram sounded better than Chris Barnes could have ever sounded.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. But,
Your Honor, I'd like to call bullshit on both of them. Right? Honor, Valour, Pride is my number 4 album. The opening track fucking rips. Inside the Wire and Pride kind of have a little bit of a Lamb of God feel at times with the way they punched out the riffs, or hanging on the, you know, like the little touches that they did kind of threw some Lamb of God at me. I don't know, maybe I was listening to a little too much Lamb of God at the time. Great closing track. K-Machine's a fucking ripper. There's some cool leads on Valour. There's a nice surprise lead to start off the song on the 7th Offense. Yeah, Honor had a really cool change about halfway through, but the rest of the song was kind of just dragging. But still, there were a lot of cool moments for me, and I really enjoyed listening to this album, so I put it at number 4, and f*** these shitheads.
All right. Well, now you've heard the wrong opinion. Let's get back to ours. This album is decent. I'll give it that. But unfortunately, like I said, it just kind of came down to it's not particularly that memorable. And Dave Ingram left the band to pretty much pursue whatever other band he decided to front at the moment. But they got back Carl Willits. And in 2005, they recorded For Those Once Loyal. This would be their final album, and man, this album is a banger.
Yep, agreed.
Number 4 for me, only because I think there's other albums better, but Jesus, I love this album. This is pretty much everything about that whole groove era. This is pretty much For Victory Part 2. And so many great melodies, so many great riffs on here.
And the mix on this record is pretty killer once again.
Reinvigorated. Entrenched, Kill Chain, which brings in that Cenotaph riff, which is across this whole discography. And of course the title track, because title tracks are rippers. The production again is pretty much perfect for this sort of album. Every song feels anthemic, big hooks. This was a proper send-up for Bolt Thrower.
This is my number 5. Yeah, again, the mix is a redeeming factor. Entrenched was a banger. Anti-Tank is a fucking banger. This is, again, I think a definite progression coming out of For Victory. And that's where I think it should have laid in the discography as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, whatever. It's a great album, and the only reason it's number 5 is because I had stuff that had to come before it.
And that he's a dickhead.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Who?
So let me
Me a dickhead?
yeah, it's too low. It's too low, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
It's my number 3. It is a non-stop battering ram, foot on the gas. It's For Victory Part 2, which was my number 2, so obviously it had to be number 3 on my list. It was an incredibly perfect send-off to be the band's final album. I think it's the shit. Tracks like Anti-Tank, Last Stand of Humanity, When Cannons Fade, just fucking rippers. And
that thrashy break.
Yeah, dude.
And like, it comes out of nowhere because they really hadn't done anything like that in years. I'm like, oh, dude, more energy, yes.
Yes, yeah. You felt this album. You could tell that it was recorded with a lot of love, and that love came through and shown itself all on my face. And I love this album. So
Glad I did not jam this album with you.
Because you would have gotten your love, or my love, all over your face as well.
That was the selling point for me to listen to this alone.
Ew.
Yeah, it's pretty sick jokes.
Now, the band took a long hiatus after this, and unfortunately in 2015, Martin Kearns died.
Rip Martin.
At only 38 too, and it was just sudden, and it pretty much broke the band's heart. And the year after he died, they decided to pretty much hang up Bolt Thrower as an entire thing. Now, Memoriam, featuring Carl Willits, continues on pretty much that spirit. It's very much along the lines of that groovy era of Bolt Thrower, but it's just still kind of missing that thing. And I know back in 2015, there was rumblings that Bolt Thrower was going to get together again.
I remember.
But it didn't really come to pass. And last year we had a new Memoriam album, so I think they're pretty much content in doing that for now. But this band has a great legacy and way to just cap off an amazing career with an amazing album. And this was a lot of fun to listen to. Like, I was already super familiar with pretty much most of this discography, but it was fun going back, especially For Victory. For Victory rekindled something for that album. Like, I felt empowered, like I should go conquer the neighbors or something. They probably wouldn't have liked that. They would have called the cops. But
depends on which neighbors. I think that lady across the street would give you a run for your money.
Yeah, actually.
That, or she would let you conquer her.
Oh.
In sexual congress.
And that's why I didn't nurture this idea to adulthood. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, just grinding of the loins.
The mashing of the loins.
The weeping and gnashing of the loins.
It's
so uncomfortable. God, why are you doing that shit with your hands? Ugh.
We're gnashing.
We're weeping.
Woo.
I'm internally weeping right now.
Good.
Either way, we're going to get on to our next discography here soon, which was Sir Jammin Jon's pick.
Morbid Angel.
Morbid Angel, and we're looking forward to go through those.
Except for one album.
Except for one album, and man, are you going to hear about that one.
Yeah.
And then after that, we'll be moving on to Mr. Shred's pick with Black Sabbath.
Yes! I can't fucking wait.
So you guys stay tuned for more of those, and we will see you soon. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for subbing. We love you guys, and
you're the best.
You're the best around.
And something, we're never going to let you down, or you're not going to let us down. It's time to let each other down.
You nailed it.
Great
job.
Yeah,
Let's ride it out on that, shall we?
Catch you guys later.